She makes more than he does. My wife laughed, lifting her champagne glass. But don't worry, somebody has to marry for love, right? The table erupted. Her mother clapped the loudest, rings glittering under the chandelier light. Bless his heart, she added with a practiced smile. Not every man is built for success. Across the table, the CEO of Meridex Corp leaned back and smirked. Someone whispered to their partner, "That's rough." Others offered me the soft, pitying look people use when they don't know what else to give. My chest tightened. The steak on my plate went cold. 8 years of marriage, 8 years of early mornings and quiet decisions, reduced to a punchline about my salary in front of 20 guests. I felt every pair of eyes settle on me, and my wife, Natalie, kept smiling, bright, satisfied, like she had said something clever and was waiting for applause. My name is Daniel Harlow, and the company that signs her CEO's paycheck, it's mine. That same night, I drove downtown after plates were cleared and the laughter had faded. Top floor office. Lights off except for one desk lamp. I opened the secure shareholder registry on my laptop. Harlow Dynamics. Founded 18 years ago by my father. Inherited by me 5 years ago, the October after he passed. Majority ownership, 61%. Name, Daniel Harlow. I stared at my name for a long moment. Then I closed the file. I had kept my ownership private from the beginning. A deliberate choice. I didn't want to be admired for money. I didn't want people adjusting their behavior around wealth the way they always do when they sense it nearby. I wanted to live an ordinary life, to understand ordinary people, to lead a company that genuinely cared about the workers keeping alive every day. And most of all, I wanted to know who the people in my life really were when they believed I had nothing impressive to offer. Now I knew the woman I had chosen, the woman I had loved and built a home with, she admired almost everything the world had to offer. Everything, it seemed, except me. The next morning, I returned to my regular desk at Harlow Dynamics. 3rd floor, mid-level finance analyst, no window. My assistant, Petra, handed me coffee without being asked. "Morning, Mr. Harlow. How's the car situation?" She blinked. Still in the shop. Another 2 weeks, apparently. Take the company shuttle. I'll approve it. She looked like she wanted to ask how I had the authority. She didn't. Later that morning, I reviewed a medical expense submission from the warehouse floor. Clarence, an 11-year employee, had filed for emergency assistance. His wife needed surgery. I approved the full amount anonymously. Then I added a note to HR to follow up on him next week. No title on the authorization. No name beyond the shareholder code. No one knew it was me, not Clarence, not HR, not any of my colleagues on the 3rd floor, including Natalie. I had structured it this way because I believe that generosity attached to a name becomes performance. Real care doesn't need an audience. But sitting at my ordinary desk that morning, I felt the weight of what I had learned the night before. I had wanted to know who people were when they thought I was nothing. Now I knew, and knowing hurt more than I expected. Home felt different that week. Natalie moved through the house with the energy of someone building toward a finish line. The vice president seat at Meridex had been dangling in front of her for months, and she talked about it at breakfast, over phone, sometimes in her sleep. If I land VP this quarter, she announced Wednesday evening, rearranging a new vase of flowers. We're upgrading everything. Everything. New neighborhood. Better car. A house with a proper study. She looked around our living room the way a person looks at something they've already left in their mind. Maybe then we won't feel so behind. Behind who? I asked. She shrugged, like the answer was obvious. I watched her for a quiet moment. The flowers were beautiful. She had chosen them carefully, but she hadn't once asked about my day or looked up from her arrangements. She wasn't chasing growth. I understood that now with new clarity. She was running from a feeling, a slow, creeping fear that her life wasn't impressive enough, that the story she was living wasn't one people would admire at dinner tables. She was running from ordinary, and somewhere along the way, she had decided I was ordinary too. Sunday dinner at her mother's house had always been a test I never studied for. The The table was polished to a mirror shine, the silverware arranged with precision. The conversation moved in practice circles, careers, appearances, and the quiet comparisons that Vivian had perfected over decades. She was a retired finance attorney with excellent posture and a gift for making compliments sound like charges. "You're still in accounting, Daniel?" she asked midway through the main course, tilting her head. "Finance, actually." "Yes." She nodded without really listening, then turned the full brightness of her attention to her daughter. "Natalie, darling, you need a man who leads. Someone who drives the narrative." The table held still for a half second. I looked at Natalie. She looked at her plate, and she said nothing. In the past, there had always been something small, a gentle subject change, a hand on my arm under the table. Something to tell me she still saw me clearly, even if she didn't know the whole picture. But tonight, she stayed silent, and that silence was louder than anything Vivian had said. It told me exactly where I stood in the story my wife was telling herself about her life. Background, furniture, a footnote she was beginning to feel embarrassed about. Monday morning, executive floor, board meeting. I sat as a silent observer, which had been my arrangement from the beginning. 12 senior leaders reviewed quarterly numbers around a long glass table. Revenue strong. Expansion ahead of schedule. On paper, Harlow Dynamics looked like a machine running at full power. But I listened beneath the numbers. Nobody mentioned the warehouse team running 12-hour shifts. Nobody mentioned that 3 department managers had submitted burnout notices last month. Nobody asked whether the people keeping this company breathing had enough left in them. I made a note on my legal pad. Culture reveals character. I had built this company, or rather, kept it alive after my father built it, around one belief. How you treat people when profit is comfortable is who you really are. I had extended that same belief to my marriage. I want to know if Natalie would choose me plainly, not for a title or a number, but for who I was when she believed I had nothing impressive attached to my name. The dinner had given me that answer in front of 20 people. And sitting in that boardroom, surrounded by conversation about margins and market share, I realized I had been running 2 quiet audits at once. Both results had come in. On Thursday, payroll ran an unusual batch. Every department received unexpected retention bonuses. No announcement, no ceremony. The money arrived quietly on a regular Thursday morning, sitting between the usual figures like a small surprise. By mid-morning, the building was buzzing. In the break room, I overheard 2 warehouse workers talking in low, moved voices. Adiz, 7 years with the company, pressed her hand to her chest, and told a colleague she hadn't stopped shaking since she saw her deposit. HR sent a formal inquiry to the CFO, Mr. Okafor. He replied in 4 words. The majority shareholder approved. No name, no further detail. People whispered in corridors. Who was the majority shareholder? Some guessed an investor. Others assumed a board member with a change of heart. I sat at my 3rd-floor desk and drank my coffee. And I wondered, with something genuinely sad turning in my chest, what my wife would say if she knew. Would she look at me the way she had at that dinner table? Or would the number attached to my name suddenly change the shape of her smile? I already suspected the answer. But I needed her to arrive at the truth, not because she discovered a figure in file. I needed her to arrive at it a different way. Natalie was distracted at dinner on Friday. She sat across from me with her phone tilted at an angle, scrolling with a slight crease between her brows. Her food went mostly untouched. The board is reviewing leadership behavior across Meridex's connected entities. She said, not quite to me, more to the air between us. Strange timing. Strange how? I asked, keeping my voice level. We're midway through the VP evaluation cycle. Nobody starts conduct reviews during that window. It throws everything off. I took a slow sip of water. She picked up her fork, put it down, picked up her phone again. It's probably nothing, she said. Someone on the board making noise. Probably, I agreed, but I knew exactly what it was. Harlow Dynamics held a significant consulting contract with Meridex, one that granted us specific governance oversight rights. Rights I had never once exercised in 5 years. Until now, not revenge. I am careful about that word because it doesn't describe what I intended. This was responsibility. If a person's leadership behavior at work matched the character they showed at a dinner table in front of 20 people, then the staff working under them deserved someone paying attention. I was paying attention. By the following week, Meridex had shifted in a particular way office buildings shift when something invisible but important is changing. Voices dropped near the elevators. Small groups formed and broke apart in the lobby. The kind of quiet that gathers when people sense real authority has started to watch. Natalie called me from work mid-morning. "They're saying the review is coming from outside," she said. "Someone with oversight rights. Reviewing promotions personally." Her voice was careful. Controlled, which meant something was moving underneath. "Personally?" I said, "That's what people are saying." A pause. "It doesn't make sense. We've never had external interference in evaluation season before." I stayed quiet. She had built her entire VP campaign on visibility and charm. She was genuinely skilled at both. She knew how to enter a room and make people feel certain she belonged at its center. But an integrity audit is a different kind of test. It doesn't care about how you carry yourself in a presentation. It wants to know how you speak to the junior analyst whose name you haven't learned. It wants to know what you do when someone below you makes a small mistake. It wants to know who you are when no one important is watching. And my wife had never prepared for that test. The formal letter arrived at Natalie's desk on a Tuesday. Executive review, leadership conduct and cultural impact. Cream envelope. The Harlow Dynamics legal seal in the corner. A detail she would not have recognized. She brought it home. She sat on the kitchen counter and stared at it before opening it. I watched from the dining table, my expression neutral, pretending to read something on my laptop. When she pulled out the letter, her eyes moved fast across the lines, the way eyes move when searching for part that says this is a mistake. "This is completely ridiculous," she said. Her voice had an edge I recognized, the tone she used when something had surprised her and she needed to push before she had time to feel afraid. "What is it?" I asked. "A conduct audit. They want to interview my entire team." She set the paper down hard, right before the VP decision. "Do you understand how this looks?" I folded my hands under the table. "It must be stressful," I said. She looked at me then, really looked, the way she hadn't in weeks, searching my face for something without knowing what. I kept my expression steady. She picked up the letter and said she'd sort it, but her hands weren't quite steady when she held it. Wednesday night. The house was very quiet. Natalie had come home late, eaten little at dinner, and gone to sit in the small armchair by the bedroom window, the one she always claimed was uncomfortable, but kept returning to when something was weighing on her. I was reading when she spoke. "Do you think I'm too hard on people?" The question arrived without warning, soft and plain. It landed between us and sat there, asking to be taken seriously. I looked up from my book. It was the most vulnerable question she had asked in months. The armor she carried everywhere, the confidence, the forward momentum, the certainty, had slipped slightly. Underneath was a real person asking something she genuinely didn't know the answer to. I chose my words carefully. "I think pressure changes us," I said, "and sometimes we forget to check whether the person handling the pressure is the version of ourselves we actually want to be." She was quiet. "My team is younger, less experienced. I push because I need results." "I know," I said. "Is that wrong?" I looked at her steadily. "It depends on how you push, and whether they know you actually see them as people." She didn't respond, and she didn't sleep well that night. Thursday, I didn't come to work. No message, no email, no explanation left with Petra, who arrived at 8 and found my desk empty and my coffee untouched. My badge hadn't been scanned at any entrance. By 9:30, the third floor was uneasy. By 10, the feeling had moved upward through the building. Approvals that require my quiet authorization, the kind no one officially acknowledged but had quietly come to depend on, sat unprocessed in the system. A vendor contract, a hardware order, 2 staffing approvals. All frozen. Board communications slowed. The CFO sent a discreet inquiry to the legal team. Natalie came home early. I was in the kitchen when she walked in, coat still on. "Something is wrong," she said, to the room, not to me specifically. At Meridex, everything stopped today. The review panel canceled without explanation. The board liaison went silent. She looked at me. "Did you notice anything unusual today? At your office?" "It was a quiet day," I said, which was completely true. Quiet and completely deliberate. I poured her a glass of water and set it on the counter. Without comment, she stood there holding it, looking at nothing, turning the situation over in her mind. She was beginning to understand that the shape of things around her had changed. She just didn't know yet that I was the shape. By Friday morning, the stillness had become something people could almost touch. Natalie went in early. She told me she needed answers from the executive floor about the review panel, the evaluation timeline, who was causing the delay. She called me at 10:30. "They won't let me up," she said. Voice clipped, controlled. "What do you mean?" "Security," says the executive floor, "is restricted pending majority shareholder authorization." She said the phrase slowly. I've never heard that used before. Not once. What else did they say? That only the majority shareholder can lift the hold. A long pause. Daniel, who is a majority shareholder of Harlow Dynamics. My pulse stayed even. "I'm not sure," I said. Another pause. Longer. "I looked it up this morning. The ownership records are private. Just says a majority shares held by an individual. No public name anywhere." Her voice had dropped half a register. "But Harlow Dynamics hold the oversight contract that's causing all of this. Whoever owns it has put my career on pause." I looked out the kitchen window at the quiet street. "I'm sure it will become clear soon," I said. She exhaled. "It needs to become clear now," she said. And she was right. It was about to. The sealed letter arrived at our house Saturday afternoon. Heavy cream envelope. Wax seal. A compass rose. The same one my father had used on formal correspondence from a company's earliest days. Natalie didn't recognize it. She had no reason to. She brought it in from a mailbox and stood in the hallway, reading the front. Executive Assembly, mandatory attendance. All senior leadership. Meridex Corp. and affiliated entities. Monday, 9 o'clock. Grand Hall, Harlow Tower. Then at the bottom, by order of the chairman, Harlow Dynamics. She turned the envelope over, then over again. Then she looked up at me in the kitchen doorway. "I've never got anything like this," she said. She read the details aloud, her voice losing steadiness as she reached the end. "I've never met the chairman," she said. "I didn't even know there was a chairman. I assumed Harlow Dynamics was run by a management committee." I kept my face neutral. "Maybe they're stepping forward," I said. She held my gaze for a moment, longer than usual. Something in her expression was searching for a handhold, some piece of familiarity in a situation that felt increasingly strange. "Why now?" she asked. "Some things," I said carefully, "take time to become clear." I went back to the kitchen. Behind me, I heard her read the letter again from the beginning. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Saturday evening, something shifted between us. We ate dinner without much conversation. She had cooked, which she only did when something was weighing on her and she needed her hands busy. Simple pasta, the kind she made in the early years of our marriage, before everything became about ambition and appearances. After dinner, she sat across from me with a cup of tea, going cold in her hands. She looked at me the way she had looked at the letter, searching, careful, like someone trying to read something in a language they aren't certain they know. "Have I been unfair?" she asked. Not about her team, not about the audit, just a question, plain, directed at me. I didn't answer, not because I had no answer, but because some questions need to breathe before they receive a response. If I had spoken too quickly, she might have used my words to settle something that wasn't ready to be settled. Silence is louder than accusation. I had learned that in boardrooms and at dinner tables, and in years of watching how much space people need when the truth is trying to reach them. She looked away first. She wrapped both hands around her cold tea, and she stayed in that silence for a long time. Long enough, I think, to begin hearing what it was saying. Sunday morning, Vivian called. I was in the study. The walls are thin, and Natalie didn't move from the kitchen when she answered. I could only hear Natalie's side of it. I know, Mum. I know how it looks. A pause. The whole evaluation timeline is frozen. I'm not sure when it resumes. A longer pause. There's a mandatory assembly tomorrow. All senior leadership. I still don't fully understand what it's about. The longest pause of all. Then, yes, I'll keep you updated. She hung up and stood with her phone pressed between both palms. I came to the kitchen doorway. Everything okay? I asked. She exhaled slowly. She wants me to push harder, call in favors, find out who's blocking the process, and go around them. She shook her head. She said if I let this fall apart, it will damage my image. Not, are you okay? Not, what do you need from me? Just, what will people think? I waited. And here was the thing that gave me a small, careful feeling of something like hope. For the first time that I could remember, Natalie did not agree with her mother. She just stood there, still, not nodding, not repeating the advice, just thinking, looking quietly, like someone who had started to see something new. Monday arrived with particular weight of a day that knows what it carries. Harlow Tower's Grand Conference Hall was built to make people feel the significance of what happened inside it. Marble floors the pale color of sand, floor-to-ceiling glass along the east wall that let the morning light fall in long, clean lines, a ceiling high enough to hold its own echo. By 8:45, it was filling. Senior leaders from Meridex and its affiliated entities filed in and found their seats. Some I recognized from board documents. Others I knew by how they held themselves. The practiced straightness of people accustomed to being observed. Natalie sat in the fourth row. Dark blazer. Hair pulled back. The appearance of someone who had decided to be composed regardless of what came next. She was looking for the chairman. Everyone was. The company had been sending formal correspondence for years, but the person behind it had never appeared publicly. Not at galas, not at press events, not at any of the company anniversaries held in this very building. It had become something people whispered about. Who owns Harlow Dynamics? Who is Daniel Harlow? I stood near the side entrance, just beyond their line of sight, watching the room settle. Today, they would get their answer. At exactly 9 o'clock, the CFO, Mr. Okafor, stepped to the front of the room. He was a composed man, gray at the temples, the kind of calm that comes from years of managing situations that can unravel and making sure they don't. He straightened his papers, surveyed the room without hurry, waited for the last few people to find their seats. The room quieted on its own. Good morning, he said. Today's assembly has been called by the majority shareholder of Harlow Dynamics, who will be addressing matters of company integrity and leadership culture. He paused. This is not a restructuring announcement. This is a conversation about the values this company was founded on and whether our daily choices remain aligned with those values. A murmur moved through the room like a slow current. The majority shareholder has chosen to address this organization directly, in person, for the first time since inheriting ownership 5 years ago. Someone behind Natalie leaned forward. She didn't turn around. It has been their preference to remain private, Mr. Okafor continued. That privacy served a purpose. Today, transparency serves a greater one. He set his papers aside. He looked toward the side entrance. The room went still, the specific, complete stillness of people who understand they are about to see something that will not easily be unseen. I walked in slowly, not through the main entrance where everyone was watching. Through the side door I had used hundreds of times in 5 years as a man with a third-floor badge going about an ordinary day. I was not wearing that badge today. I wore the charcoal suit from my father's funeral. Dark, well-fitted, white shirt with no tie. Simple. Nothing that performed anything. I walked the front at an even pace. My footsteps carried across the marble and came back different. Fuller, the way sound behaves in rooms designed to hold important moments. I did not look at Natalie first. I looked at the room, at faces I had worked beside for years without them knowing who I was. I saw a D's near the back. I hadn't expected her to be there, and her presence told me the assembly had been arranged as I'd asked, with staff from all levels included. To my right, a Meridex director drew a sharp breath. Someone near the front spoke quietly to their neighbor, and the words dissolved into the silence that fell next, solid and complete. The silence of a room full of people who had just understood that something they thought was one thing is actually something else entirely. I stopped at the front, and I looked at my wife. Her face moved through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, the kind that creases the forehead and slows the blink. Then something sharper. Recognition trying to build itself from pieces that didn't seem to belong together. Then stillness, complete and pale. I turned the room. "My name is Daniel Harlow," I said. My voice was level. Not loud, not cold. Clear. The way statements are clear when they don't need the help of emotion. I am the majority shareholder of Harlow Dynamics, 61%. The company was founded by my father, Arthur Harlow, 18 years ago, and passed me 5 years ago when he died. The room rose, not all at once, but in a wave, people standing as the information arrived and settled. I watched it move through the rows. Natalie did not stand with them. She remained in her seat, both hands in her lap, looking at me from the 4th row with the careful, disoriented expression of someone who has just heard a word in a language they thought they knew, spoken with a meaning they had never considered until this moment. The man she had laughed about at dinner. The man her mother had called limited. The man 20 guests had pitted over cold steak, was standing at the front of Marble Room, while everyone around her rose to their feet. I waited for the room to settle before I continued. Mr. Okafor had the display screen loaded with documents I had prepared. Nothing designed to humiliate, just a record of what this company had been doing quietly for 5 years. The Medical Relief Fund, 53 employees and family members supported over 3 years. Authorized by D. Harlow. The Emergency Housing Program, started after a flood, displaced 14 warehouse staff members and their families. Fully funded. Signed, D. Harlow. The Education Grants. 11 employees supported through part-time degree programs. 17 children of staff members given school fee assistance. All anonymous. All the same signature. Last on the screen, Thursday's retention bonuses. The ones at D's had been shaking over. I watched the room read. The murmurs had changed, not the nervous whispers of people unsure what was unfolding. These were the sounds of people recalibrating, putting a face to a name they had heard only in rumors, and realizing the face was ordinary, familiar, present. Natalie was reading the screen. She was reading the list of everything I had quietly done while she sat at dinner tables and called me average, while her mother suggested I lacked ambition. I hadn't done any of it to be seen, but I understood, watching her now, that she was seeing me for the first time. Then came the harder part. I had revised this section 3 times. It needed to be firm without being designed to wound. This assembly was also called, I said, turning back the room, because leadership culture is not a secondary concern. It is the foundation. Mr. Okafor advanced the display. A summary of conduct review findings. Specific patterns observed across the evaluation period. No names attached, but the people who needed to recognize themselves would. A person can hit every performance metric and still leave the people around them smaller than they found them, I said. That is not leadership. That is output. I paused to let it land. Vice President candidacies currently under review have been paused. All decisions resume after full evaluation, including direct staff assessments and team culture reports. Natalie's candidacy was among them. Paused. Not canceled. There is a difference between accountability and punishment, and I needed every person in that room to understand which one this was. She made no sound. Her face stayed still, but I saw her close her eyes briefly, just for a second, and then open them again and look at me with something I couldn't fully name yet. Not quite anger, not quite relief, something between those two things, working its way toward a third. After the formal proceedings closed, Vivian appeared. She had been given a lobby visitor pass, and someone had, mistakenly, directed her toward the hall during closing remarks. She walked in wearing her best coat and her best expression, The one she reserved for rooms she wanted to be taken seriously in. She saw me at the front. She saw the screen behind me still displaying the Harlow Dynamic seal. She saw Mr. Okafor at my right. And she stopped. I didn't need to say anything. The room said it. The height of the ceiling said it. The way people near her had turned, not toward her, but past her, toward me, said it loudest. She opened her mouth. I think. I said evenly. This is a conversation for another time. Not unkind. No satisfaction in my voice. Vivian had spent years dismissing the person who owned the building she was standing in. That was consequence enough without me adding to it. She stepped back. The room was breaking into smaller conversations. People drifting toward the exit. Others standing in quiet groups, processing. Natalie remained in her chair, looking at the space where her certainty about me had been sitting all morning, sitting alongside the realization that she had not seen clearly for a very long time. And she was only beginning to understand the full cost of that. After the assembly, people came to me in ones and twos, not because of what I owned, because of something else, something quieter that had settled over the room during the presentation and stayed after it ended. Adiz came first. She shook my hand with both of hers, said very little, but the look in her eyes said enough. A floor supervisor told me his team had started caring about the company differently since the retention bonuses. He didn't know why exactly. It just felt like someone was paying attention. The junior analyst who had nearly quit in January said the anonymous education grant had made her stay. She had not known who to thank. Now she did. I listened to each of them fully, not as performance, not to collect loyalty or goodwill, because these were the people the company was actually made of, and giving them my full attention was the most basic form of respect I knew how to offer. Natalie watched from a distance. She watched me listen. She watched the way people walked toward me and the way I turned toward them. She watched a man she had called average receive something that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with how he had chosen to use what he had. I did not go to her immediately. There was no need to rush. She was already beginning to see. That evening, we drove home separately and arrived at the same time. We went inside without speaking. She changed out of her blazer. I made tea. We sat at the kitchen table where we had shared hundreds of ordinary evenings, and for a while the quiet between us was the most truthful thing we had shared in months. She spoke first. I measured you by money, she said. Low, steady, the voice of someone who had thought carefully and decided to speak plainly. I looked at her. And I measured you by character, I replied. The words arrived without sharpness, without heat, just fact. Simple and true and heavy the way only true things are. She nodded once. I was wrong, she said. 3 words holding something large and complicated, and not yet fully resolved. I did remind her of the dinner table, the champagne glass, her mother's clap, the CEO's smirk, the 20 eyes on me over cold steak. Because the real victory was not the marble hall. It was not the pause for motion or the screen full of evidence. It was this. A man told repeatedly that his worth was invisible had gone on quietly building something real, not to be seen, because it was right. If you have ever been underestimated, let this be your reminder. Character does not ask for permission to matter. It simply continues.